Samantha from Jessima Tutorials here, and today I'm going to show you a fun way to create a pair of hoop earrings using polymer clay, metal leaf and alcohol inks. Now for today I'm going to be using gold metal leaf. This is going to give the project a slight vintage look, or just kind of an aged look. If you don't want that and you want your alcohol inks to the alcohol ink colours to look pure, you can just use silver leaf and it will give the same shiny effect without the aged effect. But I quite like the aged effect. And I'm using Pearl White polymer clay Primo today, and it is about 1.5 millimeters thick, and I used my pasta machine to roll that out. And I've just burnished that down onto the Pearl White. And there you can see how that looks. And then I have a texture stamp. Any texture stamp you want will work. This is one of the ones I sell on my Etsy store, so there will be a link to that in the description below. But again, feel free to use any image you want as a texture. And you're going to take your clay and you're going to put it metal leaf side down. And the metal leaf is going to act as a release and will help prevent the clay from sticking in the stamp. If you're a little nervous about it sticking, you can always apply a bit of cornstarch to the stamp beforehand, but in this case I think we'll be okay with just the metal leaf. You could use water in place of the cornstarch as well. And I'm just using a baby wipe over the back so that my fingers don't stick to the clay and lift it up out of the texture. And just make sure that you get a nice clean imprint. Okay, and there we go. That should just about do. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to just lift up that. And this should come out of the texture quite cleanly, though I would advise just doing it gently. Start from one side and see if it wants to lift up cleanly. If not, you can kind of go from corner to corner to get it to lift up. And there we go, you can see how that looks. Let me actually lift that up and give you a better look. And there, quite fun. And the pearl white really blends nicely in with the gold. So even though there's plenty of cracks in the surface and the metal leaf is not covering the whole surface, it does give a cleaner, more overall finished coat look than if you use something like black clay as a backing. Alright, now I'm just going to show you the alcohol inks that I'm using. I've chosen a range of oranges to reds in the Pinata ink brand because it's quite a nice, it's quite a vibrant ink brand, but you could use any alcohol ink that you want. And what I'm going to do before I apply those inks is I'm just going to tap this down onto my tile just so that it sticks down, and I'm going to apply a little bit of isopropyl alcohol just so that it allows the inks to spread a little easier. And just give me a moment. There we go. Alright, and then I'm going to start with the darkest ink, and just give me one moment to open that up. And let's just dot that around, and it should flow into the texture quite nicely, and because we applied the isopropyl alcohol, it will flow even better. And I don't want to coat the whole thing. I'm not worried about the ink covering the entire texture, I just want it mostly covered. Okay, and that was the next dark colour, which is the more pure red. And then finally I'm going to go in with the orange. And then you're just going to let that sit, and this will need to sit for a little bit. You'll probably need to allow it to sit for about 2 hours at minimum to let that ink dry, because I want the colours to be nice and vibrant. If it's going a little slow for you, you can always use a baby wipe to soak up the excess ink. but it will soak up a lot of the colour with it. So if you want a really nice bright colour, then I would advise just letting it sit until it's dried. I generally will leave it overnight, and that is a pretty surefire way to get the ink all dried and a really nice finish. Alright, and here is how it looks now that it's had some time to dry. And you can see what the back looks like as well. Quite interesting. Now what I'm going to do is, I already do like the pattern, but I want to highlight it a little bit more. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to use a bit of tape to peel off the top layer of metal leaf. Okay, and you can just use regular clear packing tape for this. And you just go place that down, smooth over the surface, and just smooth it down so that you catch all of the raised areas, especially with the texture like this where it's a little bit uneven. And then you're going to lift that up, and that's going to lift up some of that tape. And I'm actually going to go back over and do it again because it didn't reveal as much as I would have liked. And I'm going to burnish a little firmer this time. I like to be careful with it the first time round because you can always remove more tape or more metal if you can't stick it back on. And there we go, that's much better. Alright, and then I will go over and I'm going to do the other side. And keep in mind that the colour of the base clay that you use, in this case pearl white, is going to make a big difference to what this final effect is going to look like. White looks really cool because I'm not sure if the camera can pick that up, but the ink will leak under the metal leaf and around it, and so you'll end up with a cool crackled look. There we go. Alright, and I don't want to remove too much of that, and the ink will have leaked into the clay quite a bit, and so that will have created a decent amount of colour even if we've taken off the metal leaf. And there, that's how that looks. I quite like how it looks. Okay, and I've just placed it on a piece of paper. I've got another piece and I'm just going to give it a quick burnish just to smooth out that pattern, because I'm going to be rolling it into tube beads, and so I don't want the texture to be as raised as it is. I'm not too worried about it being completely smooth. I just want it flattened out enough that it's going to be easy to pop it into a tube bead shape. But if you weren't going to be making tube beads and you wanted to cut this out flat, you could leave the texture on if you wanted. And then let me just lift that up. And there we go. And there, that's how it looks. Quite a nice pattern. Right, and I'm just going to lift that off the paper because the paper will dry the clay out if you leave it sitting on the paper. So once you've done the burnishing, you do want to lift it up and off and not just have it sitting there. And now we're ready to create the tube beads. Okay, and for that I have a little metal piercing pin. Anything with a rod that is the correct diameter for your hole will work. You can use wood, metal, both will work. Okay, and what I'm going to do first before I do that is I'm going to flip this over, and it's then going to, there we go. Okay, and I'm just going to trim up this edge so that it's got a straight edge. I'm going to grab that, and I'm just going to very gently start working it. Because I used alcohol ink, the clay is going to be a little on the drier side, so you want to just do this nice and gently because you don't want it to crack. So if your clay does crack a little bit, just keep that in mind. So when you do start this project, I would advise working with clay that is a little on the softer side of things, so that when it comes to this part, it doesn't end up cracking. Okay, and I've just curled it around to the point where I know that I can cut. Put that to the side, grab this, and I might actually, yep, that will work. And then just pinch those edges together. And if you are having trouble with the clay cracking, you can use a rod that is a little bit thicker so that the clay doesn't have to curl around as far, and I find that it cracks less when that's the case. But yeah, just the best way to anticipate it is to just use soft clay. Right, and there you can see how that looks. Okay, and I'm just going to roll that just to smooth out, again, any deformities, and to just get it one nice smooth piece. And then just gently pull and twist and loosen it up on the rod. And then once you've done that, you can then use a blade to trim off the edges so that they're straight. And I'm trimming a little closer in because this one tapered a little and I want it to be nice and even. Okay, and then you can just lift that up off the rod. And there we go. And that I'm going to just bake as it is because I'm going to cut it into little he-she beads later on. And then I'm going to bring over this little crystal cutter and I'm going to cut out a shape or two, and that's going to be part of our earring as well. And I'm just choosing spots where the pattern shows up quite a bit. There we go. Okay, and that's all I need for the one pair of earrings. Just lift that up, and there we go, you've got cute little pieces. And then that is going to get placed on a piece of paper. Let me just bring that over. I'll just use one of the pieces I had from before, and I would advise just going around the edges of your piece and just tapping to smooth it out. And the back's going to have a little bit of a pattern as well because of the ink leaking through, so that's quite nice. And then we can combine everything together later on. And these are probably going to get some resin on them because I feel like this pattern would look really nice with the resin on it. Okay, and I'll just place those there, and that can get baked exactly as it is. And this is going to go in for 40 minutes at Primo's recommended temperature. And then while it is still hot, we want to take this out, so be ready for that when it's finished baking. Alright, and here it is out of the oven, and it is still very, very warm, and so it should be flexible. That's how you know whether or not it is ready for the next stage, which is just to take a really sharp blade and to then cut it into little beads. And the hotter the piece is, the easier this will be because the clay will cut easily. You can do it while it is cold if you want, but just it's going to require a bit more pressure. And so I like to take it straight out of the oven and do this. And I'm not too worried about keeping the beads in the exact right order. I'm just going to chop them and then I can use them as I want in the earring piece. And I do like to take the last two pieces and not use those just because they won't have as clean a cut. But there we go. That's how I would do those pieces. Okay, and then the next step is going to be to take these ones once they are cool and apply resin to them. And this is the resin that I am going to be using. And all I'm going to do is just apply a coat to these. and then I'm going to pop those into a UV light for about 15 minutes just to set the resin. You can also pop it into some sunlight for about 15 minutes, and that will also cure it, so long as it is direct sunlight. And just make sure to spread the resin out to the edges. If you are having trouble with the resin lifting, you can always apply 2 coats, or you might need to apply more resin. A little trick that won't work for this piece because it has surface effects is that if your resin is pooling, if you can sand the piece, sometimes I find that helps with the resin pulling, but obviously you can only do that on pieces where you don't have metal leaf and alcohol inks sitting on the surface. But if you are having significant trouble, that is something to keep in mind. Yeah, this is now going to set. Alright, and here is how that should look once the UV resin has dried and hardened. And you can see it's got quite a nice look to it. And that's how the back looks. Right, so now the next step is going to be to just drill a hole. And for that I'm just going to use this little handheld pin drill. And I'm going to drill a hole at the top here. Drill a hole wherever you want, depending on how you want it to hang. And getting that hole started can be a little tricky, but once you get it going, it should be nice and smooth from there. Because the resin's definitely harder to drill through than the polymer clay, so just have a little bit of patience in the beginning, and then it will go nice and quick from there. Right, and that's all that I need to do. Then I'm just going to grab 3 of these. They're just sitting off to the side here. There we go, because I need 3 for my earring. I then also have a little piece of cord. I'm not sure if you can see that. This is the cord that I'm using for rondelle gold spacer beads, a ear wire, a crimp bead, and a charlotte crimp. And all I do to assemble it is I will take that cord and I'll pop that through the hole until it is about halfway, and just grab those 2 ends. It's very hard to see these. This is, I think it's called Invisalign, so it is supposed to be fairly hard to see, and that's something you want in the final piece. But then you're just going to pop on a spacer, and then one of these pieces, and then a spacer, and you just repeat until you've used up all of your beads. And bear in mind that this is the length that I want. You can add more, add less, completely up to you. Then once you've done that, then you're going to pop on the charlotte crimp, the crimp bead, again capturing all of the threads when you do that, and then just lay your piece down and bring everything down so that it's sitting nice and comfortably against each other. You want a little loop sitting at the end, because when you do go to squeeze this crimp bead, and I'm going to just grab that with my pliers, you want to press that down and get it into a position where you've got a little bit of slack. There we go, so that this doesn't stiffen up and it can move around nicely. Then trim away the extra thread, and just give me a moment to get that. There we go. And then you're going to close that charlotte crimp over the top of the crimp bead. I'll actually use my fingers to do that. Sorry, this is a little finicky. There. Okay. And then all you have to do is you have to grab your ear wire and just simply attach that to the loop. And that's about it for the earring. It's a little fiddly, but I think the design is quite nice. And let me show you that one, and then I have this one over here as well. Nice and small, and I think they have a lot of movement to them because of that top piece. So yeah, that looks quite nice. But yeah, that is pretty much it for today's tutorial. If you enjoyed it, please do let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to support the channel so I can continue creating videos just like this one, please do consider becoming a member. There is a join button just below this video, or there is a link to my Etsy store where I sell things such as the cutters that I used in today's video or the texture stamp. Another way to support the video is by liking and subscribing. It's free and is very much appreciated. And again, I do hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.